Hello again. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to today's X Space. We are thrilled that to have you guys here, and we will start on the hour. So people will join later, but now we are going to start the introductions. So we're really thrilled to have you all here to discuss some exciting developments in the crypto space, especially focusing on ERC4626 tokens. And we will talk about which type of tokens are these and how Superform and Fringe Finance can help you to increase your yields and also to protect your investment from the downside risk of the underlying assets. So today we have Vrikam from Superform and Brian, our CTO, and they're helping us to shed light on these topics. We'll delve into the details of this type of tokens and explore what Superform and Fringe can offer. And we also will discuss practical use case, and especially focusing on yield isolation. So without any more further ado, let's dive in. So first, I want Vikram to introduce yourself and also tell a little bit about Superform.
Yeah, absolutely. GM, everybody, and thanks for having me. So I'm one of the co-founders of Superform. Been building in crypto since 2017. Superform for the past 2 years, and really our goal is just to improve DeFi UX for everybody. And backtrack, I guess. Always been involved and interested in making DeFi and financial services available everywhere. And really, what we're trying to do is use the power of what DeFi provides in composability and everything else with protocols such as yourself, and make it so that all these all these products and protocols can be seen and used by everybody anywhere. So yeah, excited to be here.
Thank you a lot. And Brian, can you provide a brief overview of what Fringe Finance is? And I will leave the question of what ERC 4620 tokens are to Vikram. Okay?
Yes. Great to kind of see you again. And I just want to make a comment to what you mentioned there. I think with the evolution of DeFi and these new standards, particularly the ERC 46 standard um, arising, it standardizes a whole host of operations, particularly for the yield bearing assets. And, I won't speak, or I'm not in a position to speak authoritatively about them. But the fact that you guys have harnessed that and provide a consistent user interface to a whole host of protocols that employ those underlying 46 tokens is really um, it's fabulous to see the world of DeFi evolving in that way. And the consistency and the standardization and so forth is super key. And that's something that we at Fringe are very excited about as well, and excited about being able to um, partner with Superform on this matter, and particularly, even just the single use case that we're going to talk about today. But we'll talk about all of that later. I so Fringe. What is Fringe? Fringe is essentially a margin trading and lending platform, and we operate on currently 5 different chains. And one of the key differentiators with our platform is that we support and list a whole host of assets above and beyond the, let's call it, the usual suspects of assets which are listed on many of the other lending and margin trading platforms. And that, strangely enough, opens up some very nuanced and new use cases that allows, again, DeFi to evolve. And particularly, we'll be talking about even just one single use case, which is, I'm sure, going to be very attractive to a whole host of ERC 4626 holders to participate in a more nuanced way so that they can exercise more sophisticated financial participation in the DeFi space. But that's just in a nutshell what Fringe is, that lending and margin trading platform. And we have a whole host of user facilities that attempts to make life easy for people who wish and need to use lending and margin trading platforms. There you go.
Thank you, Brian. So let's get a step back and Vikram, I want to ask you, and also for our users and our listeners, to better understand exactly what is a 4626 token and what it brings that it is different from the other ones. Can you give us a brief explanation about it?
Yeah. So 4626 contracts introduce something called a vault, and a vault is still a token. They inherit everything from ERC20, but what it adds is functions for vault actions. So it standardizes the way that money can go in and money leaves a vault through depositing and redeeming. And this is really big for crypto because we've ERC20 was a really big step forward in creating applications that allowed you to like swap tokens, for example. But investing money is a really big case for blockchains. It's what DeFi proved. And before 4626, there wasn't really any attempt to standardize how we were generating yield on chain, and that's what 4626 does. It creates a template pretty much for protocols to issue yield generating mechanisms, and then on the integrator side, it creates an expectation of things that are going to be in a contract so that it can follow an interface, and I know how to work with it and integrate it. Um, so yeah, a pretty important step forward for the space in terms of security, composability, ease of integration, that kind of stuff. And yeah, excited for some of these advanced use cases. Pretty much, I think what the standard allows for is us to really build new protocols that are leaps and bounds like forward as compared to trying to build walled gardens around products and things that aren't necessarily moving the space entirely forward. But yeah, it really allows us to build on top of each other and build better products, and that's what makes it the most exciting to me.
Wonderful, thank you. So they are like receipts that users can take them and take it to a different protocol. So they are related with their position inside of those vaults, correct? And a follow-up question, what Superform does with this type of tokens?
Yeah. So anybody, any protocol, any user can permissionlessly list an ERC4626 vault on Superform, just like you can create a pool for any ERC20 token on Uniswap, or you can make a collection on OpenSea for a 721. You can come to Superform with just a deployed contract. You don't have to have anything else with it, no front end, and just list it on Superform, and anybody can then see it. They can deposit into it from any chain, um, and some other things that we can get into later. But pretty much it just allows for the discovery and access of any ERC4626 that someone deploys.
Great. So you guys looks like a marketplace of all these type of tokens that exist on different chains. That's really cool. And Brian, so Superfarm does that related with 4626. And what Fringe can bring into the table for the token holders of 4626 tokens?
Yes. Fringe. Let me just reflect, I think, on a couple of the things that Vikram mentioned there, and um, that is having a consistent user interface to interact with a broad or the set of 46 tokens that are listed on Superform in a standardized way. So that means the 46 tokens which underlie it have, or the 46 tokens that are listed there, each have their own reason for being, so their own yield bearing strategy. And that can be achieved in a variety of ways. And irrespective of those yield bearing strategies, this singular interface allows, for example, Superform to present and allow you present in a consistent manner and allow users to interact with them in a consistent manner. Now, Fringe certainly realized with the advent of this standard that there would be certainly great potential for growth in that space. So what Fringe does is a number of things. Um, First of all, it's quite important to consider that these ERC46 instruments are composite instruments. So there is the underlying asset or the asset that underlies it, which will typically be an ERC46, an ERC20 token, plus the other element of its constitution is the yield bearing aspect to it. So with these composite instruments, Fringe realized that there is great potential for us to provide facilities to allow users to isolate their exposure to various aspects of that underlying 4626 token. Um, uh, for example, and we'll talk more later, is if a user wished to gain yield on that 40, if they thought the yield bearing aspect of it was very attractive, they could, with Fringe, expose themselves to the yield. Yet, if the user, through their own analysis and whatever opinion they had, deemed that the underlying token to the 4626 token would potentially have downward price movement, Fringe allows users to isolate their exposure to just, for example, the yield aspect of the token and remove their exposure to the downward price potential of the underlying asset. So the way Fringe achieves that is we list both the ERC 4620 tokens as collateral assets. We also list those tokens as capital assets, and also the underlying asset, the ERC20, we list those also as collateral and capital assets. So that gives users quite a degree of flexibility in how they wish to isolate their exposure and or magnify their exposure to any elements of that composite ERC 4626 instrument. I think that in a nutshell really sums up the general strategy and the general set of principles there. And I think as we talk a little further in this chat, we might talk about specific use cases and specific mechanisms on how to achieve those.
Thank you, Brian. And Vikram, another question about Superform itself. So it works like a marketplace or an aggregator that shows a lot of vaults that are on different chains. Can you explain a little bit to us what unique features the Superform offers to its users?
Yeah. So it allows you to deposit from any chain into any of those vaults in one transaction. And it makes that yield composable on that destination chain directly on that source chain. So to give you an example, let's say I'm a L2 user, I'm on Arbitrum, and I find there's a new protocol that's launching that's on Base. I don't have to bridge any funds over. I don't have to have gas on Base. I can manage everything directly from Arbitrum. I can use Superform to deposit into those 3 yield opportunities that launch, and I actually do it all in one transaction too, because we're going to be releasing a multi-vault feature shortly. And once I deposit into those base vaults, you're minted a position representing that on your source chain on Arbitrum, and you can use that for DeFi on your source chain. Those are natively 1155s, ERC 1155s that you can convert into ERC20s. Those are not 4626s, unfortunately, because depositing cross chain is an asynchronous action. But we do have some interesting things out there to standardize asynchronous vaults as well. But I digress. The unique features really are depositing and making yield composable on any chain. You can use those ERC20s that you receive on your source chain to do things like creating super pools so that you can access yield without swapping and bridging. Using that example that I just provided, those ERC20s on Arbitrum, you could provide that to a incentivized DEX pool, and users who have funds on Arbitrum, whenever they want to acquire those base superpositions, that those yield tokens, they can just swap on a DEX on Arbitrum the same way you would for any other token, instead of actually moving funds and depositing into that vault through the Superform protocol. Yeah, I had mentioned multi-vault. We have some portfolio tracking features for users. So like 4626 standardizes a lot of ways that we calculate APY, TVL, unrealized P&L, realized P&L, all that, and we show some of that stuff right now and are working on showing advanced financial metrics for a lot of those, so that users can pretty much just come to Superform and know that every one of their vault positions can be shown, tracked, and managed. So yeah, that's pretty much the high level.
Thank you. Yeah, and this is quite useful because right now we have a multitude of L2s, and it is a little bit difficult to track all the opportunities and also to bridge the funds from one chain to the other. And Superform makes that really, really easy. So that's amazing. Brian, now we talk a little bit about, for example, how Superform can help the users to get yield, the best yield that they can find on which chain that it is available. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the yield itself and how Fringe can help the user to focus on that and isolating it from the vault itself. Can you explain a little bit?
Envisage is users will have a look at Superform and they'll identify some yield bearing opportunity that is really attractive to them. For example, that might return 20% APY, let's say, and the user says, yeah, okay, I like that yield bearing strategy. I understand what they're doing. I think all of the moving parts seem fairly sound to me. I would like to participate in that instrument. Now, quite often a user would sell their assets, and Superform makes this really easy, in fact, to sell their assets that they have sitting in their wallet to then purchase the underlying instrument to the ERC 46 and then mint or open a position on that 46.26 yield bearing strategy. Now, the way Fringe comes into it is there's a use case here, but I'll describe it in three separate ways, I think, because um, they could be considered three separate use cases, such as a Superform user, I want to earn yield using Superform without losing my exposure to my existing asset holdings. For example, I might have my portfolio structured in such a way that I really like the exposure to those assets. And so Fringe helps participate in the Superform ecosystem without losing that exposure that you've already established in your existing portfolio. And another variant of that use case is, as a Superform user, I want to hedge my exposure to the underlying asset of the ERC 4626 token. For example, if the yield opportunity is a very attractive yield opportunity, but if I'm not that familiar with the underlying asset, the underlying ERC 20 token, or I believe that there could be some downside price potential on that underlying ERC 20, I can hedge my exposure to that underlying asset of the ERC 4626 token. And another kind of variant of this use case, because it's all really the same mechanism when it comes to Fringe, is I want to, as a Superform user, I want to hedge my exposure to the underlying stablecoin asset. And I mentioned that it might sound slightly counterintuitive that the stablecoin asset could have some downside potential. But this was a point that Vikram, in fact, raised in some of our earlier discussions, where in a bull market, we anticipate the market as a whole typically to rise. And in which case, relative to the overall market, the stable coins, even though they remain a peg to the US dollar, they are relative to the rest of the market experiencing, and I'll quote, use air quotes here, downward price movement relative to the other crypto assets. So, so that's just a variant on this use case. And they're really the problems that Fringe is attempting to solve with this particular use case. And I won't talk in any great detail about other use cases, except perhaps to mention some of them, such as if I have a ERC 4626 position, I can seek extra yield through Fringe. I can not only isolate my exposure to the yield, as we'll talk a little further, but we can secure loans using collateral of the ERC 46 tokens. We can amplify exposure to my current 46 positions. We can deploy these assets within leveraged trading positions. So we can speculate on various assets, and we can deploy this capital in such a way that gives us the opportunity to increase the capital efficiency of our holdings. And we can even short ERC 4626 tokens, and there may very well be reasons to do that. But and also with some ERC 4626 opportunities, there are staking opportunities where those staking opportunities may in and of themselves be very attractive to the user. And with Fringe, we even offer the opportunity or enable the opportunity to earn yield from staking without being exposed to the ERC 4626 token itself. So that's just a bit of a laundry list to give people a bit of feel for the new use cases that now arise with these new standards, and in conjunction with the new standards of the ERC 46 standard, and in conjunction with Fringe and its ability to list a great variety of assets, exotic assets that are not found on many or any other lending and margin trading platforms. James, did I answer your question there, or was there something that I missed?
No, I think you covered pretty much everything, but I wanted to focus a little bit on the yield isolation opportunity that Fringe can provide. I think you said that you were touch that later. Did I understood correct? If it was, please continue.
As I mentioned, there was that use case of isolating yield exposure. And I touched on some variants of that use case and why a participant may wish to engage with Fringe in conjunction with Superform to achieve that use case, which is um, isolating yield without losing exposure to my existing assets, and um, to achieve the yield even on US dollar based ERC46 yield strategies without having exposure, if you like, to that relative downward price movement of the underlying stablecoin. Now, um, on Fringe, the way to achieve that is very, very simple, because once you've opened up and had a look and identified the opportunity on Superform, there's just a few steps required to achieve this strategy, which is on Fringe, use your existing assets by depositing those as collateral. So you always maintain your exposure to those assets you already own and that you've chosen to own because quite potentially you're enjoying or exposed to the upside potential of those assets and you believe passionately in them and you wish to continue to hold them. And then step two is with that collateral, you then borrow the underlying asset of the ERC4626 token. And the next step there is to use that, now that those assets are sitting in your wallet, use those assets just as a regular Superform user to open the ERC4626 position. And again, that can be on any chain that Superform supports. And also the borrow position with Fringe does not have to be on any particular chain. So it can be on the liquidity pool within Fringe or the capital pool that will give you the least price impact as you borrow from that capital pool, and that has the lowest APY or borrower APY. So there's quite a bit of flexibility to execute on this strategy in a way that best suits your needs in that case. So we're quite excited about this, that it does give users quite the ability to use or to enjoy or achieve a fairly controlled and nuanced way to participate in these DeFi opportunities in ways that are as capital efficient as possible.
Thank you, Brian. And Vikram, as you can see, we are really excited of how the possibilities that we can use Fringe combined with Superform to enable users to get more yield from these vault positions. And I wanted to ask you something about the future. Um, how do you see the evolution of this type of tokens, and how do you think that Superform can help to enable this future? Do you have something for us here?
Yeah, I think the short answer is exactly what Brian was just saying, which is that the future for how people use 4626s is going to be through these simple but efficient layers on top of them that just provide base layer functionality to these assets that just wasn't possible before. Like the idea of of yield isolation that Fringe is providing is important because there's a lot of yield on Superform that is USDC or USDT yield, and that might be earning 30-40%, but a lot of people wouldn't necessarily want to be holding stable coins in a bull run. And even if the price of ETH goes up by 30%, then that kind of makes up for what they would have earned for an entire year on that stablecoin vault. So I think that what ERC 4626 provides is that single asset underlying smart contract mechanism, but there are cases where having that could be of detriment, and it's awesome that protocols like Fringe and broadly lending borrowing protocols are tackling the use case for expanding and making up for the some of the consequences that 4626 provides, but just generally building toward those new applications in DeFi. I hope that we'll see, in touching on like the evolution side of it, is I hope that more and more protocols build these kinds of simple layers on top of the standard, and when we combine all of it, I think it'll result in something really really special. And we have lots of people in the 4626 lines that are working on similar but different things. And I think that when you combine this with things like yield optimizers and perps trading, and using 4626 as collateral for other things, I think that we end up with a really really vibrant ecosystem, and just generally like we end up with products that people actually care to use. And I feel like that's the should be the goal here. And uh, step by step, things like this enable real consumer applications to be built in DeFi. So I think that's the most exciting thing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this overview. And you touched something that I want to ask Brian, but first I have a different question for him. Brian, did you cover all the possibilities that you wanted to cover right now using Fringe and Superform? Because my next question would be, okay, we are using Fringe here with the, let's call the regular tokens, not the vault tokens that 4626 are represents. But I know that we will have future integration that will enable 4626 tokens inside Fringe. So can you cover these two topics on your answer?
The use case that I mentioned with Superform to isolate exposure to the yield with minimizing and eliminating the exposure to the underlying asset. Fringe has a new release currently in audit, which will directly allow us to list ERC 46s as capital and collateral assets, and that unlocks a whole host of additional use cases. But I think even today, by virtue of Fringe being able to support a wide range of assets, a wide range of exotic ERC20 assets, which gives it a greater ability to take these yield isolation positions on a greater range of ERC46 tokens that have their own unique, or that have that wide variety of ERC20s that underlie them. We offer this use case and will continue to offer a better venue than other lending and margin trading platforms in the DeFi ecosystem. So this is something quite strategically that we're one of our focuses, and we think that in collaboration with um, these new tools such as Superform that brings greater accessibility and therefore greater adoption to these instruments, we work alongside that to provide users with the ability to undertake nuanced and sophisticated financial strategies to maximize the capital efficiency of their assets. And they have the power to decide the desired exposure to maximize their potential gains and minimize potential risks. That's one of the key things here, because they're composite instruments. People can pick and choose now using all of these DeFi facilities in ways that I think, just in the brief way I described this, that represents a fairly straightforward, easy to use user experience to achieve these nuanced ways to select your exposure.
Thank you, Brian. And I think we are going to the end of this X Space, and I want to thank you, Vikram, for the time with us. And I want to ask if you have any last remarks from Superform, and maybe tell us a little bit of about your roadmap. If you guys have something exciting coming up in the next months, can you give us a last remark?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited for future of 4626 generally, and yeah, I think that collectively we're going to build a lot of really cool stuff in the ecosystem. On the Superform side, uh, things on the horizon: integrations, new chains, new bridges, new interoperability solutions to make the user experience better and constantly cheaper for users as well, and more secure. And then new yield types had mentioned. ERC 4626 really sets the building block for additional tokenized vaults, but we've realized a lot of things that um, we'd like to have supported generally in vaults that we're going to be extending ERC 4626 for. So stuff around asynchronous actions, multiple assets, that kind of thing. And I think that this next month will be really big for extensions of 4626 to get to more yield. And yeah, pretty much it. And constantly, looking for ways to do things with protocols like Fringe and expand the pie here. So thanks.
Thank you. And yeah, looks like a lot of exciting stuff is coming from for Superform. Brian, do you have any last words on Fringe side?
A user guide for the use case that we talked about in this discussion today, and specifically in relation to Superform. So we'll publish that within the next day or so. I think, James, there is a new diagram in the draft for that. So if you're already assembled the Medium article, you may just need to update it slightly. Fringe also, as mentioned, is very soon releasing support for direct support for listing ERC 4626 tokens, both as collateral and capital assets. So that unlocks additional use cases. That's coming very shortly. Also, we're doing something very similar with LP tokens. So that therefore services a whole new market and a whole host of additional use cases for liquidity providers. And we see that as quite an extensive market that does not have well serviced facilities to allow them to participate in a nuanced and controlled manner to isolate their exposure or amplify their exposure in easy to use ways. Also, Fringe currently has an incentive program for lenders on our platform because we use spot markets, so lenders are quite a crucial aspect there. So if people are interested, have a look at our incentive program, and you can certainly be eligible for Fringe rewards and additional yield, effective yield on lending capital that you provide to our platform. In a nutshell, that's it. So have a look at our social media. Once we release this user guide, have a look. And if people have questions, hit us up on our channels. And Vikram, great that you could join us today. Thanks very much. And yeah, James, thanks for running us through that.
So thank you guys. Thank you everyone for being here with us. This X Space was recorded, so we are going to release it on our social media and also on our YouTube channel. And thank you, Vikram, once again for being with us today. And see you guys later. We will have another X Space probably next week. And Vikram, if you want to say something, please go ahead.
That's it. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, James. Great to be here.
Okay. Thank you guys and see you guys later. Bye bye.
Yep. Bye.